What if I told you that, in just 1 minute, centuries of royal tradition were shaken to their core? That a single announcement from King Charles has set off a chain reaction echoing through the walls of Buckingham Palace and beyond? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That's not hype. That's exactly what just happened. Today, we're bringing you inside the storm. The moment when Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, their children Archie and Lilibet, along with Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, were officially stripped of their royal titles. No leaks, no speculation. A firm royal decree, publicly delivered by the monarch himself. For those who have followed the British royal family over the years, through scandal, service, and spectacle, this moment is monumental. Not just because of what was announced, but why. And just as importantly, why now? Because beneath the polished speeches and carefully worded press releases lies a much messier story. A divided family, deep-rooted power struggles, unresolved betrayal, and a king caught between honoring tradition and reinventing a centuries-old institution. This isn't a fairy tale anymore. This is the royal family on the edge of a major transformation, and for some total erasure. We're about to unpack it all. But before we dive into the ripple effects, the backlash, and the personal toll this decision has already begun to take, let's rewind for a moment. Just imagine this. It's mid-morning in London. A subdued but formal press briefing is announced by the palace. No leaks, no build-up, no warning. A royal correspondent receives a cryptic early alert. News vans begin assembling outside Clarence House and Windsor. Cameras roll. Aides move with purpose. Something big is coming. But no one quite knows what. Then silence. A door opens. An official steps to the podium. A statement is read. Brief, controlled, and then it lands. Following a comprehensive review of royal duties, His Majesty King Charles III has determined that select members of the extended royal family will no longer carry titles or associated privileges. The names are read next, one by one. No elaboration, no commentary, but the shock is instant. The implications are explosive. Harry, Meghan, Archie, Lilibet, Beatrice, Eugenie. That moment, that announcement, did more than change their official status. It rewrote the public image of who belongs to the crown and who no longer does. It sent a clear message to insiders and observers alike. King Charles is not afraid to draw a line, even if it means cutting off blood. And if you've been paying attention, that line has been inching closer for years. Because this didn't happen overnight. The story begins long before that minute-long announcement. It starts in 2020, or maybe even earlier, when Harry and Meghan shocked the world with their decision to step back from royal life. The term Megxit entered the global lexicon. Royal watchers chose sides, and the first fracture in the House of Windsor was exposed. In the beginning, the palace tried to manage the optics. Queen Elizabeth kept things civil. Officially, the Sussexes retained their titles but agreed not to use their HRH status. It was a compromise, a delay, a way to buy time and prevent an outright war, at least while the Queen was still alive. But once Charles took the throne, everything changed. Charles inherited more than just a crown. He inherited a royal family in crisis, a younger generation less committed to duty, a public increasingly skeptical of monarchy, and a global press machine eager to feast on every crack in the foundation. He knew he needed to act fast, decisively, strategically, and so whispers began of a slimmed-down monarchy, a version of the royal family that's smaller, more focused, less expensive to maintain, and easier to manage. The idea was simple. Reduce the core to those who actively serve the crown and remove those who don't, no matter their bloodline. But even with that vision in place, few expected this level of action. Few imagined Charles would go this far. Because here's the thing, removing titles isn't just paperwork. In royal culture, it's personal, it's symbolic. It's public affirmation of who is in and who is out. It affects everything from security protocols to public invitations, from historical lineage to how children are addressed in future generations. It defines royal status in the eyes of the world. And the moment those names were read aloud, that status was erased. officially. Let's talk about why this is different. Yes, royals have had titles removed before. Edward VIII abdicated. Diana lost her HRH after her divorce. Even Prince Andrew was stripped of his military titles and patronages in the wake of scandal. But never before have two generations, cousins, siblings, and grandchildren, been publicly cut off in one fell swoop. And never before has the move felt so final. Make no mistake, this is not a temporary reshuffling. This is a redrawing of the royal map, a narrowing of the House of Windsor's future. But the question on everyone's mind is, what pushed Charles to make this move now? Was it the growing pressure from inside the palace to establish clear lines of loyalty? Was it the backlash from ongoing controversies involving Prince Harry's memoir, podcast interviews, and public criticism of the crown? Was it concerns about royal branding, image fatigue, and reputational risk in the age of 24-hour social media? Or was it something deeper? A father making a hard call, a monarch choosing legacy over love, a king unwilling to let family drama threaten the integrity of an institution he spent his entire life preparing to lead? The answer may be all of the above, because the royal family has always operated at the intersection of politics, performance, and power. Every photo op, every balcony wave, every holiday card, it's all curated for public perception. And the longer Harry and Meghan stayed in the gray area between royal insiders and independent celebrities, the more blurred that line became. The same could be said for Beatrice and Eugenie. Though not working royals, they've long walked the tightrope between private citizens and palace-adjacent figures. Their roles have always been quietly debated, but never definitively resolved. Until now. That's why today's announcement isn't just administrative. It's emotional, it's generational, it's institutional, and it's already causing ripple effects. Family members are reportedly blindsided. Royal experts are calling this a turning point. Supporters of the Sussexes are framing it as punishment. Traditionalists are calling it overdue. Meanwhile, the public is once again split down the middle. Some say Charles is cleaning house. Others say he's burning bridges. Whatever your stance, one thing is undeniable. The monarchy will not be the same after today. So where do we go from here? That's what this video will explore. In the next few chapters, we'll break down everything you need to know. The full statement from the king, the reactions from Harry, Meghan, Beatrice, and Eugenie, the palace intrigue that led to this decision, and what it all means for the future of the royal family. We'll also trace the lineage of royal title removals, analyze the public and media response, and dig into what role power, pride, and politics played behind the scenes. Because this isn't just a royal shakeup. It's a test of the monarchy's ability to adapt and survive. So stay with us. What happens next may just define the legacy of King Charles and reshape the House of Windsor forever. The announcement came without a smile. It was just after 10 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning in London. No royal birthdays, no state visits. Just gray clouds rolling low over Buckingham Palace and a sense of something brewing. An unexpected alert landed in the inboxes of royal correspondents, major news outlets, and press agencies. A media call at Clarence House. No topic listed, no speakers named. The timing was deliberate, but the mood, heavy, unspoken. By 10:45 a.m., speculation was rampant. Was this about Prince Andrew? Was the king unwell? Was this the long-anticipated constitutional update on the future of the monarchy? Then came the detail no one expected. There will be a formal statement regarding titles and royal duties. Just 15 minutes later, the palace gates opened to let a single black jaguar crawl through. Inside, Sir Clive Alderton, the king's private secretary. Always composed, always careful with his words. He didn't walk to the microphone. He stepped, like someone following instructions from a higher authority. The seal of the royal household glinted at his chest as cameras clicked into life. Then he read from a single white sheet. This morning, His Majesty the King has issued a formal proclamation regarding the structure of the royal household and the ongoing role of certain members of the royal family. After extensive deliberation, His Majesty has determined that select individuals who are not engaged in official royal duties will no longer retain courtesy titles or the associated privileges and entitlements. He paused, then continued, naming names with deliberate cadence. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, along with their children, Master Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Miss Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor, shall no longer retain titles linked to their former status as working royals. Similarly, Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice and Her Royal Highness Princess Eugenie, daughters of the Duke of York, will no longer bear their styles or titles in an official royal capacity. He ended with a final sentence, flat and surgical. This decision reflects His Majesty's intent to uphold the principles of clarity, accountability, and public trust within the modern monarchy. Then he folded the paper, stepped away from the podium, and left. No questions, no follow-up, no elaboration. The silence that followed was loud. Within minutes, the footage hit every major news network in the UK. It spread like wildfire across social media, picked up by American outlets, Australian commentators, and political analysts alike. The tone of every anchor was the same. Shocked, cautious, processing in real time. Because this wasn't an internal memo. This wasn't a quiet palace reshuffle. This was a very public, very irreversible decision, delivered with surgical precision. And here's what made it even more explosive. The palace didn't bury it in technical jargon or legal ambiguity. The wording was clear. These individuals were no longer considered part of the formal royal family. Their connection was not erased by blood, but by duty or the lack thereof. Let's unpack what that actually means. First, for Harry and Meghan. They had already stepped back in 2020, announcing their intention to become financially independent and pursue their own work outside of the crown. At the time, they retained their Duke and Duchess titles but agreed not to use the HRH, Her Royal Highness, styling in public. But now it's gone further. What this new proclamation has done is cut the last remaining symbolic tie between the Sussexes and their royal past. They are now, effectively, private citizens with no formal connection to the institution of monarchy. Not only that, their children, Archie and Lilibet, are also removed from any formal styling. This strips them of not only titles but the path to any honorary roles, ceremonial positions, or traditional protections reserved for those within the royal system. Then there's Beatrice and Eugenie. This part was less anticipated and arguably more controversial. Beatrice and Eugenie have never been working royals. They've led private careers, married outside of the royal limelight, and often supported the family from the sidelines. But they were born princesses. They carried HRH status from birth. Their titles weren't granted, they were inherited. And that made them, in the eyes of many royal watchers, untouchable. Until today, in removing their official titles, King Charles has drawn a boundary that even blood can't cross. His decision says this: if you are not actively working for the monarchy, you are not a formal part of it. It's a cold, modern approach driven by reputation, optics, and lean governance. But it also sends a message. The monarchy is no longer a family business. It's a constitutional institution, and Charles is managing it like a CEO. It's worth noting that the announcement did not come with a press conference or Q&A. There was no warm photo op, no staged expressions of family unity. The statement was read, the doors closed, and the palace remained silent. Why? Because this announcement wasn't for the family. It was for the public. This was the king's answer to growing questions about the size, scope, and cost of the monarchy. Questions that intensified after Harry and Meghan's departure, after Prince Andrew's scandals, and after years of increasing criticism from British taxpayers and global commentators. This was Charles saying, "I hear you." It's also important to understand how rare this kind of declaration is. In royal tradition, titles are not revoked lightly. It requires months of planning, legal review, and often family negotiation. This move had clearly been brewing behind the scenes for some time, and the suddenness of the announcement was not a sign of chaos, but control. The king knew what he was doing. He wanted this decision to land with weight, and it did. In the hours that followed, the reactions began pouring in. Royal aides offered no comment. Buckingham Palace released a one-line follow-up. His Majesty's proclamation stands as issued. That's it. There was no softening of the blow. No clarification about the personal feelings involved. And that silence said more than any quote could. Because behind every word of that announcement was years of tension, hurt, and conflict. None of it acknowledged, all of it implied. For many, the statement confirmed what they suspected. That the rift between Charles and his youngest son is now permanent. That the royal family is no longer pretending this is a misunderstanding. And that for Beatrice and Eugenie, their ties to public royal life are officially over. Some royal watchers described the announcement as surgical. Others called it cold. But all agreed, it was decisive. And in royal history, decisive moments are rare. The last time anything this severe happened was during the abdication crisis of 1936. Even then, the decision was framed as one of love, a king giving up his throne for a woman he loved. Today's announcement is framed in the language of leadership, not emotion, of management, not family, and that's what makes it so powerful. This wasn't a king losing control. It was a king taking control. Still, many questions remain. Was the family notified in advance? Were there conversations behind the scenes? Were Harry and Meghan consulted or informed before the announcement was made? What about Beatrice and Eugenie? Were they blindsided? Or did they agree to the change quietly to avoid further drama? So far, the palace isn't saying. But what's clear is that the monarchy has entered a new era. The rules are changing. The bloodline is no longer a guarantee of status. And King Charles, just 1 year into his reign, has shown that he is willing to make hard, unpopular, and even painful decisions to reshape the crown. This announcement wasn't about punishment. It was about power. And in the royal world, power isn't just about who wears the crown. It's about who controls the narrative. Today, King Charles took full control of that narrative. And in doing so, he changed the lives and legacies of 6 members of his own family. As this story unfolds, the question isn't whether the royal family will recover. The question is whether this family, divided by duty and reshaped by force, can even recognize itself anymore. And for those who just lost their titles, that recognition may already be gone. The names were unmistakable. The statement had been read. But for millions watching, one question remained. Why these 6? What made King Charles zero in on Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, their children Archie and Lilibet, and the princesses Beatrice and Eugenie? On the surface, the official line was simple. These individuals were no longer engaged in formal royal duties. But behind that explanation lies a tangled history of family fractures, public pressure, personal choices, and political necessity. Because make no mistake, each name on that list represents a different wound in the royal body. And the king, in his own way, just cauterized them all at once. Let's start with the most obvious. Prince Harry and Meghan. When Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back as senior royals in January 2020, they didn't just leave their roles behind. They left behind a version of royal life that they believed was unsustainable, emotionally damaging, and increasingly toxic. Their joint statement said they wanted to carve out a progressive new role within this institution, one that allowed them to serve the Queen while being financially independent. The palace response was swift. After a series of meetings now known as the Sandringham Summit, it was clear there would be no half-in, half-out arrangement. Harry and Meghan retained their Duke and Duchess titles but agreed not to use their HRH styling. They moved to North America, first to Canada and then California. They launched Archewell. They signed media deals. They did Oprah. From that moment on, the separation became permanent but not yet formal. Now it is. By removing their remaining royal titles, King Charles has finished what began almost 5 years ago. There are no lingering questions about whether the Sussexes are senior royals. There is no ambiguity about their children's place in the family structure. Charles didn't just acknowledge the separation. He locked it in. But why now? Several reasons may have driven this moment. First, the sheer accumulation of public tension. Since leaving the UK, Harry and Meghan have been involved in a series of high-profile, often controversial projects, including the Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, and Harry's memoir Spare. Each of these productions contained claims, criticisms, and personal revelations that deeply strained relations with the royal household. Some were met with silence from the palace. Others, like accusations of unconscious bias or neglect, stirred enormous public debate. Second, there is the matter of control. So long as the Sussexes retained any titles, they retained the ability to leverage their royal identity, even passively, in ways that weren't sanctioned by the palace. Though Harry and Meghan never used the HRH titles, they remained the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Their children, by virtue of being grandchildren of the sovereign, became eligible for prince and princess status after Archie and Lilibet, by royal protocol, became eligible for prince and princess status upon the accession of King Charles. There were questions behind palace walls. Should they be granted those titles? Would it be a risk to offer them formal royal status while their parents continued to speak out publicly and build commercial empires? So the decision was delayed. And in that delay, resentment grew on both sides. Then came 2022. Queen Elizabeth died in September, and Charles ascended the throne. That moment should have brought the family together. Instead, it deepened the divide. At the Queen's funeral, Harry and Meghan were visibly separated from the working royals. Harry wore civilian clothes, not military uniform. He was excluded from major briefings. Meghan was treated with distance. Behind closed doors, insiders say the atmosphere was tense, polite, and cold. Charles, now king, had inherited not just the throne, but the family fracture. He was determined not to let it drag into his reign. He reportedly told close advisors he wanted clarity. No more blurred lines. No more half in, half out. If people weren't working royals, they needed to be off the public stage, titles or not. The Sussexes' Netflix series was released just weeks later. In it, they again revisited the racism claims, the mental health struggles, and their view that the palace failed them. Harry accused William of screaming at him. Meghan accused staff of leaking to the press. Charles, palace insiders say, was livid. That series was followed by Harry's memoir, Spare, released in early 2023. In it, Harry described altercations with William, tensions with Charles, and his resentment of Camilla. He exposed personal moments. He rewrote the family narrative. And most devastatingly, he did it under his royal title. That was the final straw. By mid-2023, Charles had begun quiet talks with his senior advisors. The goal? A formal line in the sand. Those not actively serving the crown should not carry the crown's name. It was during these conversations that Beatrice and Eugenie entered the frame. Unlike the Sussexes, they hadn't broken away. But their father, Prince Andrew, had become a liability. His association with Jeffrey Epstein, his disastrous BBC interview, and the out-of-court settlement in a civil sexual assault case had irreparably damaged his standing. He was removed from public life. But his daughters, by default, became the last remnants of his royal branch. And that presented a problem. Though never working royals, Beatrice and Eugenie occasionally appeared at royal events. They still used their HRH titles. And as nieces of the monarch, they represented a part of the family tree that Charles wanted to quietly prune. He saw a future monarchy built around himself, Camilla, William, Kate, and their children. Everyone else was just family, not institution. This wasn't personal. It was structural. So, when the proclamation was prepared in the fall of 2025, the names were clear: the Sussexes and their children, and the daughters of Prince Andrew. 6 individuals, all outside the new model, all holding onto legacy titles that no longer matched their roles. Charles reportedly shared the plan with Prince William first. William supported the move. He had long advocated for protecting the monarchy's image, and he saw the ongoing drama as a distraction from his own role as heir. Other royals were briefed quietly. Beatrice and Eugenie were informed shortly before the announcement. Harry and Meghan were not, at least not directly. There was no last-minute negotiation. No pleading. No compromise. The statement was drafted, reviewed by legal counsel, and scheduled. Then it was read. And in that moment, everything that had built up over 5 years, every choice, every silence, every public jab and private hurt, culminated in a single act. Charles made it official. 6 names. Removed. Redefined. Repositioned. And behind that move wasn't just anger or control. It was legacy. Charles knows his reign is not a long one. He came to the throne late in life. His window to leave a permanent impact is small. And so, he's not wasting time with ceremony. He's making changes. The stripping of titles is part of a broader strategy. Rebrand the monarchy, protect its reputation, and ensure its survival in a century that increasingly questions the value of inherited privilege. To do that, Charles had to confront the past. And he did it with precision. The decision may feel sudden to the public. But behind the scenes, it was years in the making. Every conversation, every press leak, every emotional interview was a brick in the wall that now separates the core royal family from the rest. And it's likely just the beginning. They found out like the rest of the world. At least, that's what sources close to Harry and Meghan are saying. No official phone call. No advance briefing. No moment of familial courtesy before the royal proclamation went public. Just the cold reality of a global headline, and their names on the list. If you believe those close to the Sussexes, the silence before the storm said everything. There had been no sign from Buckingham Palace that the hammer was coming down. No sense of negotiation. Just a looming distance that had become all too familiar. Then, one morning, the message arrived not in the form of a call, but as a global press alert. They were no longer part of the royal institution. Officially, permanently, and publicly. For Harry, this wasn't just a procedural change. It was a final door slammed shut. Inside their Montecito home, things reportedly moved fast. The news hit social media before it reached their staff in full detail. Phones started ringing. Aides scrambled. PR teams began preparing responses. Journalists parked outside their estate. Within an hour of the announcement, the story had taken over headlines across 3 continents. Harry and Meghan have not, at the time of this script, released an official joint statement. But sources familiar with their inner circle have been clear. They were deeply hurt, blindsided, and angry at the coldness of the move. One source told a major U.S. outlet, they expected something at some point, but not like this. Not this formal. Not this public. Not this ruthless. Let's be clear. This isn't just about names on a list. For Harry, this was a public declaration that his birthright no longer holds institutional value. That he is, in the eyes of the monarchy, no longer a prince who serves, but simply a man who left. For Meghan, it's more layered. Since the beginning, she's been the lightning rod. Accused of stealing Harry away from his family. Blamed for the couple's exit. Targeted by tabloid media in the UK. Dissected endlessly by royal commentators. She entered a system that didn't know how to hold her, and, in many ways, rejected her before she ever had a chance to belong. This move, in many ways, confirms what she always feared. That her family's connection to the crown was conditional, and now that connection has been severed. But beyond the personal, there are deeper implications. For their children, Archie and Lilibet, the removal of royal titles doesn't just impact status. It changes how they're positioned for life. It affects future security arrangements. It affects how they're perceived in the public sphere. It affects the narrative that Harry and Meghan have tried to control from day one. Remember, when Archie was born, there was public confusion about why he wasn't given the title of prince. At the time, the palace said it was in line with royal tradition, that grandchildren of the sovereign become princes and princesses only when their grandfather ascends the throne. That time has now come. Charles is king, and instead of granting those titles, he has erased the option entirely. Harry has spoken before about the importance of protecting his children, about the trauma he experienced growing up under constant scrutiny, about the weight of being born into an institution that doesn't always protect its own. For him, part of the exit from royal life was to shield Archie and Lilibet from that legacy. But now, with this decision, he faces a new reality. His children aren't royal anymore. Not by title, not by tradition, not by protocol. And yet, the burden of their legacy still follows them. For Meghan, there's another layer. Much of her post-royal work, archetypes, Archwell interviews, has been about reclaiming narrative, about telling her side of the story, about detaching her identity from the institution that tried to define her. But this move by King Charles isn't just symbolic. It's strategic. It tells the world, they are not us. And that has consequences. Already, there's talk in media circles about how this will affect the Sussex brand. Will they still be seen as royals in exile, or simply ex-royals? Does this increase their credibility with anti-monarchists? Does it alienate them from the British public further? Does it finally give them freedom, or has it taken something irreplaceable? There's no clear answer. But behind the scenes, make no mistake, this was a blow. Insiders say Harry was furious that his children's names were included, that he saw it as a personal affront, not just an institutional reshuffle. He reportedly reached out privately to palace aides after the announcement. So far, there's been no official response. Meghan, ever the strategist, is said to be focused on long-term positioning. Sources say she believes this move will only validate what she's been saying for years, that the system is archaic, selective, and cold. Some say she sees this as an opportunity to pivot, to reinforce their independence, and double down on causes and content that showcase a life outside the crown. And what about the emotional fallout? This wasn't just a legal or PR issue. This was family. Harry has now lost his grandmother. His father has publicly disavowed his formal royal role. His brother is reportedly still not speaking to him. His royal identity is gone in practice and now in name. For someone raised within the strict codes of the Windsor dynasty, this isn't just a career change. It's a psychological separation, a spiritual one. He grew up third in line to the throne. He wore military uniform. He walked behind his mother's coffin. He served the crown in Afghanistan. He was, for years, the most popular royal of his generation. Now he is no longer royal at all. Not by the palace's standard. Not by the king's. There is, of course, the public response to consider. Supporters of the Sussexes have called the move punitive, vindictive, and unnecessary. Social media lit up with debate. Some pointed out the hypocrisy of maintaining Prince Andrew's Duke of York title while revoking those of 2 children under age 6 who have done nothing but be born. Others defended the move, arguing that Harry and Meghan have profited off their royal status while openly criticizing the institution. But one thing is clear, the Sussexes were not invited to this decision. They were subjected to it, and that will shape everything that happens next. Will they escalate publicly? Will Harry sit down for another interview? Will Meghan speak about her children's future and what this means for their identity? Will Archewell issue a statement? Or will they take the high road and let the news play out while privately recalibrating their brand? As of now, there are no official plans. But insiders say meetings are happening. Strategies are being redrawn. Legal teams have been looped in. And behind those private Montecito gates, 2 people are now figuring out how to parent children who have been publicly erased from the institution they were born into, without letting it define them. Because that's the other side of this moment. It's not just about what was taken away. It's about what's left behind. Harry still has his name. Meghan still has her platform. They still have their family, their home, their voice, their global reach. But the royal connection, the one thing that gave them both power and pain, is now severed. And what they do next will determine whether this moment becomes the final chapter in their royal story, or just the beginning of a new one they write for themselves. Explores the surprising inclusion of Beatrice and Eugenie, the complexities of royal identity, and what this means for loyalty, lineage, and the quiet casualties of royal restructuring. They never made headlines the way Harry and Meghan did. They didn't sit down for bombshell interviews. They didn't write memoirs. They never formally stepped away from royal life, because they were never truly part of it to begin with. And yet, when the names were read aloud in King Charles's statement, theirs were there. Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, stripped of their royal styles, removed from formal public status, without scandal, without controversy, just removed. So the question is, why? Why did Charles choose to include Beatrice and Eugenie in this sweeping move when, on the surface, they had done nothing wrong? Why take away titles from 2 women who had never asked for more than quiet participation, occasional support, and basic acknowledgement? To answer that, we need to go back. not to the present fallout, but to the foundation that shaped their roles in the first place. Beatrice and Eugenie were born into a shadowed branch of royalty. Daughters of Prince Andrew, Queen Elizabeth's second son, and Sarah Ferguson, a duchess whose relationship with the palace was always a little strained. From day one, their roles were vaguely defined. Technically royal, legally princesses, but unofficial in every other way. They weren't born to be working royals. There was no plan for them to take on full-time royal duties. No expectation that they would stand on balconies or attend weekly public engagements. And yet, because of their titles and proximity to the crown, they were always seen as adjacent to power, even if they never held it. This created a strange tension, one the palace never fully resolved. When they were young, Beatrice and Eugenie were included in family events, royal tours, holidays with the Queen. They were educated at elite schools, given high security protection, and expected to carry themselves with the polish and discipline of royalty, even without the job description. Then came adulthood, university, careers, marriages, motherhood, all without official royal funding, all without formal duties. Still, they continued to use the HRH, Her Royal Highness styling. They still sat in the royal box at major events. They still carried the weight of being royal, even if they weren't paid to be. And it worked for a time. As long as the monarchy was stable, as long as the Queen was alive, as long as their father, Prince Andrew, wasn't the subject of criminal investigations. Then everything changed. When Prince Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein came to light, the royal family faced its biggest scandal in decades. Lawsuits, accusations, a televised interview that became a global punchline, and eventually, a settlement that, though not an admission of guilt, sealed his fall from public life. Overnight, Andrew was out, titles removed, patronages returned, public roles eliminated. But his daughters remained caught in the middle. This was when the quiet campaign to reframe Beatrice and Eugenie's position began. From inside the palace, whispers started to grow. Was it appropriate for them to continue using HRH titles while their father had been disgraced? Was it right to present them as princesses when they were effectively private citizens? Could the monarchy afford to maintain a blurred line? 1 foot in, 1 foot out, especially with King Charles planning a streamlined, duty-only monarchy? Charles had always been open about his vision. A smaller royal family, fewer public roles, less taxpayer burden, more accountability. When he became king, he didn't just inherit the throne. He inherited a royal structure bloated with legacy titles and unofficial participants. If he wanted to modernize it, he needed to act. So he made a decision, a quiet one at first, then public. Beatrice and Eugenie would no longer be considered official members of the royal family. They would retain their family connections, of course. Their bloodline is undeniable, but their status as HRH would be removed. Their titles, symbolic as they were, would no longer appear on official documents or invitations. Their royal affiliation, already loosely defined, would be dissolved. Not because of something they did, but because of who they are not. They are not full-time royals. They are not performing royal duties. They are not part of the firm. And in Charles's world, that means they are not included. But let's be clear. This isn't just institutional reorganization. This is personal. Beatrice and Eugenie are reportedly devastated. One source close to their family said the decision was a gut punch. Another said they felt blindsided, having believed they had carved out a respectful, dignified space just outside the core royal circle. A place that allowed them to support the family when needed, but otherwise live normal, private lives. They weren't demanding more. They weren't stepping on toes. They were simply trying to exist in a system that had never fully defined them. And now that existence has been rewritten. Insiders say Beatrice, the elder sister, has taken the change particularly hard. She has long been known for her diplomatic approach to royal life. Always respectful, rarely outspoken, loyal to both the crown and her parents. She once said in an interview that she considered it an honor to support the Queen in any way I can, despite not being a working royal. Now, the quiet loyalty has been rewarded with public erasure. Eugenie, the younger and more outspoken of the two, is said to be furious on behalf of her father. Though she's never publicly defended his actions, her relationship with Prince Andrew remains strong. She visited him during his most difficult periods. She included him in her wedding. She brought her son, August, to see him regularly. This latest move, she feels, is another punishment directed at him, paid through her and her sister. Whether or not that's true, the perception matters. And perception, in the world of royalty, is reality. The public response to their removal has been mixed. Some commentators say it was inevitable, that the monarchy cannot continue to carry symbolic titles that serve no institutional purpose. That if Harry and Meghan, who at least once served publicly, were removed, Beatrice and Eugenie had to go too. Others see it as unnecessary, cruel even, a final jab at two women who've done nothing but remain polite, quiet, and uncontroversial in the face of family drama. But the real issue here isn't public opinion. It's precedent. This move signals a shift in how the monarchy defines membership. Blood is no longer enough. Birthright is no longer sacred. If you are not working, you are not royal. If you are not serving, you are out. And that changes everything. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the question now becomes, what next? Do they fade into private life completely? Do they drop their royal surnames? Do they stay silent? Or do they finally speak? Up to now, both sisters have been disciplined, careful. Even as other members of the family gave interviews, wrote books, or stepped into the spotlight, they stayed grounded. But the removal of titles opens the door to something new: independence. Without the royal restriction, Beatrice and Eugenie now have a blank slate. No protocols, no limits. They could speak freely, write, produce, advocate, launch foundations, or simply disappear into private life for good. It's their choice now, and ironically, it may be the first time in their lives that they truly have one. Still, it's impossible to ignore the emotional weight of this decision. For two sisters born into royalty, raised within the palace walls, and trained from childhood to carry themselves with royal grace, this isn't just a policy shift. It's identity loss. It's a redefinition of who they are. They weren't just stripped of titles. They were removed from history books, pulled out of protocols, quietly sidelined by the family they've always stood by. In doing so, King Charles hasn't just streamlined the monarchy. He's drawn a brutal line through a family tree already splintered by scandal, grief, and division. Beatrice and Eugenie didn't rebel. They didn't walk away. They stayed. And still, they were cut. This wasn't a test of rebellion. This was a test of loyalty. And their loyalty, it turns out, wasn't enough. No royal move this big goes unscrutinized. Within minutes of King Charles's announcement, news desks, royal commentators, former palace staff, constitutional lawyers, and body language analysts were already weighing in. What does this mean? Why now? What precedent does it set? Is this the beginning of something larger, or a final stroke of containment? If the public was shocked, the experts were alert. This was history unfolding in real time, and the people who've spent decades studying the royal machine knew exactly what to look for. The first reaction came from royal historian Robert Lacey, who famously consulted on the crown and authored several books on the monarchy. "This is Charles asserting authority," he said on a live BBC panel. "Not as a father, not as an uncle, but as a king. He's sending a message to the entire institution, and perhaps to the nation, that royal identity must now be earned, not inherited by default." Lacey's interpretation framed the announcement not as a punishment but as a pivot. "Charles is drawing the monarchy inward," he continued. "He's watching the public mood. He knows the appetite for excess is gone. The scandals have piled up. The firm has too many loose ends. This is his way of trimming the fat and refocusing the brand." On Sky News, royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills echoed that view, but added another layer. "It's not just optics," she said. "It's operational. Security, staff, resources. All of these titles carry behind-the-scenes costs. If the monarchy is to survive another generation, especially under a cloud of austerity and Republican sentiment, it has to justify every person it elevates. Charles is applying that filter now." But not all reactions were neutral. Emily Andrews, a veteran royal journalist known for her sources inside the palace, didn't hold back. "This was ruthless," she said. "Cold. Executed with surgical precision. No ceremony. No softening. It shows you exactly how Charles operates. Cleanly and quietly, but with devastating force when he wants to." Andrews believes the Sussexes, in particular, were deliberately made examples of. "Let's be honest. This was personal. Harry and Meghan weren't just removed, they were erased. And to include their children, that wasn't about policy. That was a message." That message theme came up repeatedly. Dr. Anna Whitelock, a professor of monarchy and politics at City, University of London, expanded on it. "This was Charles taking a page from corporate leadership," she said. "Define the mission. Identify what aligns. Cut what doesn't. It's the logic of the modern boardroom, not the ancestral throne room. And that's why it feels so jarring to traditionalists." Whitelock pointed to how Charles has always viewed the crown as both sacred and strategic. "He knows it's not enough to be the monarch. You have to maintain control over the narrative of monarchy. That means pruning, tightening, reframing." The Sussexes blurred the boundary between royalty and celebrity. Beatrice and Eugenie, through no fault of their own, became entangled in the Andrew mess. Charles isn't correcting individuals. He's correcting perception. But the move wasn't without critics. Some experts warned it could backfire. Tom Quinn, a royal biographer, argued on LBC Radio that stripping titles from children could damage the monarchy's emotional appeal. "The monarchy has always been about more than rules. It's about identity, legacy, and continuity. When you start revoking titles from young children, Archie and Lilibet, who are completely innocent, it starts to feel mean-spirited. That could alienate even moderate royalists." Quinn went on to say that Charles risks being seen not as a reformer, but as an enforcer. He wants to project strength, but strength without compassion in the royal context often looks like coldness. The Queen always had a velvet glove over the iron fist. Charles may have skipped the glove entirely. Then there was the legal angle. Constitutional expert Dr. Craig Prescott from Bangor University broke down the mechanics behind the move. Technically, the monarch can adjust titles and royal status under the royal prerogative. It does not require parliamentary approval unless the title is peerage-related, like dukedoms or prince/princess styles. In this case, the king likely used letters patent to enact the change. It's legal, it's binding, but it also bypasses debate, which is why it feels so abrupt. Prescott also addressed the broader question. Could this move open the door to deeper reforms? Absolutely, he said. This kind of streamlining, removing extended family from the formal structure, paves the way for a monarchy with fewer players and clearer roles. We may see more moves like this, even a revisiting of how succession is handled or how public funding is allocated. Charles is drawing a new blueprint. Some experts also saw echoes of past royal ruptures. Historian Hugo Vickers compared this to Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. That was a king walking away from his role for love. but it forced the monarchy to reinvent itself. This is different, but the effect is similar. We're watching a rupture that could redefine the next era. Others drew parallels with the aftermath of Princess Diana's divorce. In 1996, when Diana lost the HRH style, it was framed as protocol, said former Palace Press Secretary Dickie Arbiter. But everyone knew it was painful. Titles are identity in the royal world. Removing them always cuts deep. And that's what we saw today. Identity snatched. Not all voices came from within Britain. Internationally, commentators weighed in with their own lens. In the US, where Harry and Meghan have built their post-royal life, CNN's royal analyst Max Foster described the move as a deliberate break, likely to increase the Sussexes' US credibility but worsen personal ties with the British monarchy. In Australia, a republic-leaning country, columnist Van Batum wrote, "Charles has just handed Republicans a gift. He's shown that royal titles are political, conditional, and revocable. That makes the monarchy look more like a brand than a tradition. So where does this leave public perception?" Experts agree. It depends. For traditional monarchists, Charles's move may feel like overdue cleanup. A long-awaited trimming of unnecessary branches. A sign of discipline. A refusal to let bloodlines dictate roles. For modernists, it could be read as progress. Proof that even ancient institutions can evolve, clarify, and draw firm lines. But for those somewhere in the middle, those who want to believe in the human side of royalty, this might sting. Because the message isn't subtle. Serve or be removed. The monarchy, as it's being reshaped under Charles, is not a family business anymore. It's a structure, a system, and anyone who doesn't contribute to the structure has no place in it, no matter who they are. That's a radical departure from the warm, inclusive image cultivated by Queen Elizabeth. She famously made room for tradition and compassion. Charles, it seems, is favoring order over sentiment. And according to experts like Lacey and Whitelock, that may very well be the defining trait of his reign. Strategic, pragmatic, cold, if necessary, but always focused on legacy. Because if there's one thing all analysts agree on, it's this. Charles is thinking about the history books. For a monarchy that depends on public trust, perception is everything. And in the hours and days following King Charles's historic announcement, the British public and the global audience watching from afar had no shortage of opinions. In the UK, reactions ranged from strong support to utter disbelief. In central London, outside Buckingham Palace, a retired schoolteacher named Sandra didn't hesitate when asked by a reporter what she thought. "It's about time," she said. "Too many hangers-on. The Queen did her best to keep the family close, but Charles has to do things differently. If they're not working royals, they shouldn't have titles. Simple." A few feet away, a university student shook her head. "But Archie and Lilibet? What did they do wrong? They're kids. Stripping them of titles just feels cruel." This divide between those who see the decision as logical and those who view it as harsh played out across newsstands, talk shows, and online platforms. Tabloids like the Daily Mail praised the king's bold leadership and clear-headed modernization. The Guardian, meanwhile, ran an editorial questioning the timing, tone, and calculated coldness of the move. Call-in shows lit up. On LBC Radio, some callers said Charles was finally taking control. Others accused him of pettiness. A few wondered aloud whether the monarchy should still exist at all. What emerged wasn't just a spectrum of reactions, but a generational split. Older Britons, raised with memories of Queen Elizabeth's restraint and Charles's long wait to ascend, seemed more willing to view the decision as overdue streamlining. "He's cleaning house," said one caller in Manchester. "You can't run a monarchy like a circus. Either you're in or you're out." But younger voices were more skeptical. "Why are we even talking about this in 2025? asked a viral TikTok creator. "We're in a cost-of-living crisis. The royals should be focusing on helping people, not managing internal drama like it's an episode of Succession." On Twitter, now called X, the hashtag #NotMyKing trended for several hours. In response, defenders of the monarchy launched #SupportTheKing, creating a digital battleground of opinion. Memes, comment threads, and debates exploded across timelines. Some users pointed out the perceived hypocrisy of keeping Prince Andrew's Duke of York title intact while revoking those of children with no scandal attached. Others argued that Harry and Meghan had long rejected royal protocol and couldn't expect to keep privileges while building careers as media personalities in California. One user wrote, "Harry said he didn't want the job. Now Charles is making it official. Can't have it both ways." Another fired back, "Punishing toddlers to send a message to their parents? That's not leadership. That's revenge." Beyond Britain, international reactions were just as passionate and even more polarized. In the United States, where Harry and Meghan have built a post-royal life, media coverage framed the announcement as a final act of rejection. CNN headlined their piece, "King Charles cuts ties. Harry, Meghan, and their children officially removed from royal fold." The tone? Sympathetic to the Sussexes. American talk shows picked it up fast. On The View, co-hosts debated whether the king had gone too far. "Meghan was never accepted," said one. "This is just the latest slap in the face." Another countered, "They walked away. They made a choice. Titles don't grow on trees." In Australia, a constitutional monarchy where Republican sentiment has been simmering for decades, commentators saw the announcement as confirmation of royal irrelevance. "This proves what we've always known," wrote columnist Peter Fitzsimons in the Sydney Morning Herald. "The monarchy is a family business, and King Charles is acting like a CEO protecting the brand. It has nothing to do with public service anymore." A poll conducted by YouGov Australia 2 days after the announcement showed a 6-point bump in support for severing ties with the monarchy. The headline read, "Charles just helped the Republican movement more than any politician could." In Canada, where the crown still technically reigns but is rarely discussed, the response was more muted. But analysts noted that young Canadians, especially among Indigenous and immigrant communities, saw the move as a reminder of how exclusionary the monarchy still feels. In India, South Africa, and Jamaica, former colonies with deep, complicated histories with Britain, the announcement sparked renewed debate about inherited privilege and post-colonial symbolism. "How is this still news in 2025? Asked a Delhi-based journalist. "A rich family rebranding itself should not be on the front page while millions face real problems." Still, not all reactions were negative. In several parts of the UK, especially among royalist strongholds in southern England and rural Scotland, the sentiment was more about stability than sentimentality. On a call-in show in Kent, a caller named Peter said, "I like Harry, but let's be honest, he left. Meghan wanted a different life. They've got it. Charles is just formalizing the divorce." Others pointed to the need for clarity. "Too many gray areas for too long," said a former Army veteran. "This removes confusion. And frankly, it's what the Queen would have done if she were younger." Interestingly, among some working-class Britons who have traditionally been skeptical of royal extravagance, there was grudging approval. "I don't care much for the royals," said one woman interviewed outside a Tesco in Birmingham. "But if they're cutting back and getting serious, that's something. Maybe they're listening to the people for once." Among youth culture, the reaction was more cynical but revealing. On platforms like Instagram and TikTok, Gen Z creators used humor, parody, and sarcasm to comment on the announcement. One viral video showed a mock boardroom with cardboard cutouts of royal family members being fired, with a caption, "King Charles holding layoffs like he's Elon Musk." Another featured a fake job interview, where someone pretending to be Lilibet asked, "So, do I still get free corgis or nah?" But beneath the humor was a pointed critique. Royalty, for many younger people, feels increasingly performative, detached, less relevant. And this announcement, while dramatic, only reinforced that feeling. Still, some younger royal fans came to Charles's defense. A thread on Reddit's r/United Kingdom subreddit debated whether this was the most progressive move the monarchy has made in years. "Think about it." One commenter wrote, "It's about trimming privilege, cutting out passive titles, making the monarchy more like a modern institution. I don't like the royals, but this makes sense." That tension between reform and cruelty, between modernization and control, is at the heart of public reaction. To some, King Charles is a reformer finally taking bold steps. To others, he's a distant father using royal tools to punish and exclude. And that ambiguity is exactly what makes this moment powerful. Because public opinion isn't just about likes, shares, and call-ins. It shapes legacy. It defines what sticks in memory. Right now, Charles is gambling that this act of control will be seen as strength. But if the public shifts, if sympathy for the exiled outweighs admiration for the firm, his legacy could tip towards something else entirely. Control comes at a cost. And the public, in the end, decides whether the price was worth it. What happened with Harry, Meghan, Beatrice, Eugenie, and their children might feel like a first, but it isn't. Not entirely. British royal history is filled with moments when titles were not just stripped, but redefined. Moments when kings and queens acted not out of personal grievance, but institutional necessity, and sometimes, both. Moments that shook the monarchy, reset boundaries, and changed how the world viewed royalty. To understand the depth of what King Charles has done, we have to understand the precedents. Because this isn't just a modern headline. It's part of a centuries-old pattern. The monarchy, again and again, redefining who belongs and who does not. Let's begin with the most infamous example. The abdication of Edward VIII, 1936. In December 1936, King Edward VIII became the first British monarch to voluntarily step down from the throne. His reason? Love. He wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee, something the Church of England and the British government opposed. Faced with a choice between the crown and his heart, Edward chose the latter. But that choice came at a cost. When he abdicated, he lost the title of king, but not his royal blood. His brother, the new King George VI, created a new title for him, the Duke of Windsor. He was allowed to keep the style of His Royal Highness, but with a twist. The style would not extend to his wife, Wallis. She would become the Duchess of Windsor, but she would never be an HRH. It was a deliberate slight, a royal cold shoulder, a reminder that while Edward had chosen love, he had also forfeited his place in the institution. Sound familiar? It's a pattern that would repeat itself in softer forms over the next century. A pattern of proximity to the crown being both a privilege and a pressure point. Princess Diana, titles in the wake of divorce. When Diana married Prince Charles in 1981, she became Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales, a title carrying immense public weight and media scrutiny. After her separation from Charles in 1992 and their eventual divorce in 1996, the question of titles became a matter of both protocol and symbolism. The Queen reportedly offered Diana the opportunity to retain her HRH style. But Charles, by then deeply estranged from Diana, objected. She lost the HRH status but retained the title Princess of Wales. It may seem like a technical detail, but it was far more than that. Losing HRH meant Diana would have to curtsy to her former husband, to her sons when they were with Charles, and to any royal